Ever heard of the shepherd who brought the Roman Republic to its knees? No? Well, this is the story of a forgotten hero, a guerrilla genius who rose right from the ashes of a massacre to challenge the greatest superpower of the ancient world.
Historians looking back on this were just stunned. They didn't describe him as a man, but as something out of a myth, a hero straight from the pages of Homer's epics. And that quote right there, it just perfectly sets the stage for the incredible, larger-than-life story of Viriathus.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the hero, we first have to understand the world that made him. And that world was one of brutal Roman expansion into the Iberian Peninsula, what the Romans called Hispania. Now, this map shows us exactly what Rome was after. See that orange territory? That's the land of the Lusitanians. Ancient writers talked about how incredibly rich and fertile it was. And you have to remember, for the Roman Republic at this time, conquest wasn't just a policy, it was an engine. An engine that was always hungry for more fuel. Slaves, grain, precious metals. Plus, you had all these ambitious generals desperate for military triumphs to boost their careers. This land promised it all, and Rome was dead set on taking it, no matter what.
So, what did Roman rule actually feel like for the folks on the ground? Well, it was basically a checklist of oppression. We're talking about crippling taxes, having your grain seized, your mines exploited, and corrupt governors who were just bleeding the provinces dry. And maybe worst of all, this cynical habit of making treaties and then breaking them whenever it was convenient. When you apply that much pressure, something is bound to snap. Leaders aren't just born, they're often forged in fire. And the fire that created Viriathus, well, it was a particularly horrific act of Roman betrayal. And look, this wasn't just a one-off thing. It was a pattern, and it was getting worse. In 152 BC, a broken treaty. A year later, a neighboring tribe gets massacred after they'd already surrendered. Then you get to the breaking point in 150 BC. The Roman praetor, a guy named Galba, comes to the Lusitanians with what sounds like a great deal. He tells them, lay down your weapons and I'll give you new, fertile lands to live on. Yeah, it was a lie. A total trap. The Lusitanian warriors gathered, completely unarmed, trusting the Romans, and Galba's legions just surrounded them and cut them to pieces. Thousands were killed, the few who survived were sold into slavery. And watching it all, somehow managing to get away, was our guy, Viriathus. He was one of the very few who escaped.
And this is the moment. This is where a survivor becomes a rebel. He's fueled by this raw desire for revenge, but also something deeper, a need for justice. Viriathus dedicates himself to one thing and one thing only, fighting Rome until the bitter end. You can almost feel that vow being made right here.
What came next was a conflict so intense, so absolutely ferocious, that the historian Polybius gave it a name, the War of Fire. And who was at the very center of that inferno? Viriathus.
And he showed his genius almost immediately. Picture this. 10,000 Lusitanians are completely trapped by a Roman army. He doesn't panic. He comes up with his brilliant, daring escape plan. He takes a small, hand-picked force of 1,000 guys to act as a rear guard, and they hold off the entire Roman army while the rest of his people just melt into the hills. It was an absolutely audacious move that not only saved his people, but instantly made him their undisputed leader.
So how in the world did he do it? Well, this breakdown shows you everything. Viriathus just refused to fight Rome on their terms. See, Rome relied on its heavy infantry, its rigid formations, these big set-piece battles. Viriathus, he used lightly armed raiders who were fast and unpredictable. He basically turned the train itself into a weapon, avoiding those big battles in favor of lightning-fast ambushes. He was, in essence, pioneering guerrilla warfare. And the results were just devastating for Rome. In his first major victory against the praetor Viriathus, his forces took out 4,000 Roman soldiers. 4,000! That was nearly half the legion. And yeah, it included the commander himself. He was beating the unbeatable. And this wasn't a fluke. For 8 years, Viriathus beat general after general, legion after legion. He pushed Rome to the absolute breaking point, until he managed to do something that nobody thought was possible. So after trapping yet another Roman army, he doesn't slaughter them. He offers them a peace treaty. And it was a treaty so fair that the Roman Senate itself approved it, officially declaring Viriathus amicus populi Romani, an ally of the Roman people. I mean, just stop and think about that. This was a mind-blowing victory.
A shepherd from some backwater province had literally forced the Roman Republic to recognize him as an equal and his homeland as its own sovereign nation. This was the absolute height of his power, a total moment of triumph. But it brings up a really chilling question, doesn't it? Can a superpower that thinks it has a right to rule the world ever truly be friends with someone who beat them?
The answer, tragically, was no. For the Roman elites, a peace treaty that came from a defeat was just a deep political humiliation. And for the new guy in charge, the consul Caepio, inheriting a peace deal instead of winning a glorious war, that was a career killer. The honor of Rome and his own ambition demanded a victory. And if he couldn't get it on the battlefield, well, treachery would have to do. So the Roman commander, Caepio, secretly went to 3 of Viriathus's own ambassadors, Audax, Didelchus, and Minoris. He offered them a fortune to do the unthinkable. They went back to their own camp, and while their leader slept, they murdered him. And here's the coldest part. When the assassins went back to Caepio to get their reward, they were met with this cynical, brutal line. The Romans had used them to get rid of their greatest enemy, and then they just tossed them aside. It was the ultimate, most ruthless expression of Roman power. So Rome had killed the man, but they found out pretty quickly they couldn't kill the idea he represented. The death of Viriathus may have been the end of the war, but it was the very beginning of his legend. And this is why his story still matters. To this day, he's immortalized in stone. He's celebrated as a national hero across both Spain and Portugal. These statues are a powerful testament to a legacy that just could not be extinguished.
His name lives on everywhere. He's celebrated in epic poetry. His victories are honored on a regional flag. You can walk down major streets in Lisbon and Madrid named after him. And get this, in 2019, his legacy literally reached the stars when a planet was named Viriato in his honor. He's become this eternal symbol of resistance against overwhelming power.
Which leaves us with one final thought. Okay, Rome won the war. They conquered Lusitania. But here we are 2,000 years later, and we remember the name Viriathus, not the names of the generals who betrayed him. So who really won in the end?